In the fall of 2008, Joel Vasquez collected 5 dead refrigerators from the bulk pickup routes in Fargo, North Dakota. He was not looking for refrigerators. He was looking for the foam inside them. That distinction between what an object is and what it contains is the entire story. Most people who walked past those refrigerators on the curb saw a disposal problem. Joel saw roughly 225 square feet of urethane foam insulation at an R value of 13, rated to maintain a 40-degree temperature differential in both directions, engineered by people who had spent serious money figuring out exactly how to stop heat from moving through a wall. He saw that for free. He was 44 years old. He had spent 12 years as an appliance repair technician working routes across the Fargo metro for a company that serviced residential and light commercial equipment. He had taken apart more refrigerators than he could count. He knew their internal structure the way a surgeon knows anatomy, not from a diagram, but from having his hands inside them hundreds of times in conditions ranging from comfortable to miserable, always with a purpose, always with a specific failure to find and correct. The company he worked for closed in the summer of 2008, not dramatically. There was no announcement, no severance package, no warning beyond a gradual reduction in the dispatch calls that had been the rhythm of his working life for over a decade. By August, the calls had stopped entirely. By September, the company's phone number had been disconnected. By October, Joel was in a situation he had not seen coming, which is the specific quality of financial collapse that makes it so effective at undoing people who prepared for everything except the thing that happened. He ended up at the encampment on the western edge of Fargo, near the Red River flood channel. About 30 people, a mix of tents and improvised shelters, the informal social structure that develops wherever people share difficult ground, long enough to develop opinions about each other. Joel set up a nylon tent in the first week and understood within 3 nights that a nylon tent in Fargo in October was not a solution to anything. It was a delay. He started thinking about the refrigerators on his 4th morning there. He had walked past the first one 2 days earlier on his daily circuit of the neighborhood. A white Frigidaire with a cracked door hinge set out at the curb with the mechanical certainty of an item that had been decided upon. He had kept walking, the way you keep walking past things when your hands are full of other problems, but his brain had already registered it in the way that 12 years of professional pattern recognition registers things without being asked. The door had not been pulled. The foam was intact. He went back for it that afternoon. He found the second one 2 blocks over. The 3rd and 4th were on the same street. A rental property that had apparently done a kitchen renovation and decided bulk pickup was simpler than a second trip. The 5th was behind a restaurant supply dumpster, a commercial unit with walls even thicker than the residential models. He loaded all 5 onto a cart he borrowed from a man at the camp named Garrett, who ran an informal lending operation in exchange for labor, and spent 2 trips moving them to a flat area near the eastern edge of the camp. Then he started working. What Joel knew about refrigerator disassembly that most people do not is this. A refrigerator is not complicated. From the outside, it looks like a sealed monolith. From the inside, after 12 years of field work, it is a straightforward series of panels held together by clips, screws, and the specific laziness of manufacturers who designed for speed of production rather than longevity. The inner liner, the plastic or metal shell you see when you open the door, comes off in sections if you know where to look for the retention points. The foam behind it is adhered to the outer shell, but not bonded chemically in a way that survives careful prying. Joel removed the foam from each panel in clean sections, setting them aside with the facing intact, working through each refrigerator in about 40 minutes, the same time it took him to do a compressor replacement on a clean job. He did this at the edge of the camp, and the camp watched him. A man named Cecil, who had been at the encampment for 2 winters and considered himself an informal authority on what worked and what didn't, came over on the 2nd afternoon and stood with his arms crossed at a distance that communicated skepticism without requiring him to fully commit to it. He said it looked like Joel was building a house out of kitchen appliances. Joel said he was using the foam from the kitchen appliances. The appliances themselves were going back to the curb. Cecil said foam from inside a refrigerator was not the same thing as insulation. Joel looked at him for a moment. He said, "It is urethane foam at 2 inches of thickness with an R value of 13. That is what insulation is." Cecil said he'd seen people try all kinds of things and that the ones who tried clever things usually ended up in the shelter by January. Then he walked away. There was a younger man named Terry, mid-20s, who was new to the camp and had not yet developed Cecil's confident skepticism. Terry came over with genuine curiosity and watched Joel work for half an hour, asking questions. He asked why the foam from a refrigerator would keep something warm when the refrigerator was designed to keep things cold. Joel thought that was actually a very good question. He explained it this way. A refrigerator maintains a temperature differential. It uses foam insulation to separate the cold interior from the warm room around it. The foam does not know which side the cold is on. It only knows how to slow the movement of heat through a wall. The compressor drives cold into the box, and the foam keeps it from leaking out. When you remove the compressor, the foam still works. It still slows heat transfer. You are just changing which side you were standing on. Terry thought about this for a while and said it made sense when Joel put it that way. Joel said most things did when you understood the underlying mechanism. Now here's the part of the story where I want to be honest about something, because it almost never gets included in the version people tell later. Joel's first attempt at the door was wrong. He built the frame for the sleeping module over 5 days, salvaged 2x4s from a demolition dumpster 2 blocks from the camp, cut and fitted with a handsaw, jointed at the corners with metal brackets he pulled from a discarded shelving unit. He lined every surface with the harvested foam panels, cut to fit with a box knife, pressed against the framing and held in place with construction adhesive from a tube he found at the same dumpster site. The floor got 2 layers offset so the seams didn't align. The walls and ceiling got 1 layer each, gaps filled with smaller pieces cut from the irregular trim sections. And then he built the door from plain plywood, hung it on 2 hinges, and called it done. He moved in that night. The temperature outside dropped to 18 degrees. The interior temperature at midnight was 43, which was excellent, 25 degrees of separation from passive insulation alone. He logged it and went to sleep feeling, for the first time in weeks, like the problem was solved. He woke up at 3 in the morning, cold. Not the ambient cold of the room, which had held. The cold was coming from the door. He lay there for a few minutes understanding what had happened. The door was a flat sheet of plywood with no insulation. Every other surface in the structure was R13. The door was R0.5. The thermal envelope he had built had 1 gap in it, the size of a door, and the cold was finding it with the enthusiasm that cold always finds the weakest point, because that is what cold does. In his notebook the next morning he wrote door. Then he fixed it. He went back to the disassembled refrigerator parts and found the door gasket still intact on 3 of the 5 units. A refrigerator door gasket is a magnetic seal, a flexible rubber strip with a magnetic core that creates an airtight compression seal when the door closes, specifically designed to eliminate the infiltration that would otherwise compromise the refrigerator's temperature maintenance. Joel pulled all 3 gaskets carefully, keeping them in continuous lengths. Then he lined the interior face of his door with the last significant foam section he had, adhered it the same way as the walls, and ran the refrigerator gasket around the full perimeter of the door frame, tacking it with small nails at 4-inch intervals. The next night, the exterior temperature dropped to 12 degrees, the interior at midnight, 51. At 4 in the morning, 47. The door was sealed. The foam was doing its job. The system worked as a system instead of as foam panels with a gap in them. He wrote the corrected readings in the notebook. Underneath the earlier entry that said door, he wrote, fixed. There is something I want to ask you directly, and I want you to actually think about it rather than just read past it. If you had been in that situation, you have built something, you have done the work carefully, and then you discover on the first cold night that you got one part wrong. Do you fix it and write it down? Or do you decide the problem isn't as bad as it seems and go back to sleep? I ask because the answer to that question is the whole difference between people who build things that work and people who build things that almost work. Almost work is not a category that survives a Fargo January. Joel wrote it down and fixed it. Leave your answer in the comments. I'm genuinely curious how you think about that moment. November came in the way that Fargo Novembers arrive, not with drama, but with duration. Cold that settles in and makes itself at home, that you stop thinking about as a weather event and start thinking about as a condition. Temperatures in the low single digits at night, wind off the open plains that made the thermometer reading feel like optimism. The camp managed it the way the camp always managed it, each person according to whatever they had accumulated in terms of materials and experience and the specific stubbornness that outdoor living develops in people after the first winter. Cecil was running a small propane heater inside his tent. He was careful about it, a cracked window, a carbon monoxide detector he had bought at a hardware store close out. But propane canisters cost money, and the cold that November was eating through his supply faster than he'd budgeted for. He mentioned this to Joel one morning in a tone that was not quite an admission of difficulty, but that contained one. Joel noted that his own heating cost for the month had been $0. Cecil looked at the structure without saying anything for a moment. Then he asked how warm it was getting inside. Joel showed him the notebook. The readings for the past 3 weeks. A column of interior temperatures next to a column of exterior temperatures. The gap between them was consistent, 25 to 30 degrees of passive separation, maintained entirely by foam that had been engineered for exactly this purpose by people who had no idea it would ever be used this way. Cecil stood reading the notebook for a while, then he said, "Those are better numbers than my tent with the heater running." Joel said they were. Cecil handed the notebook back and walked away. He did not say anything else. He did not have to. December arrived with a cold snap that the Weather Service described as significant and that the people in the camp described with words the Weather Service would not have used. 3 consecutive nights below 0, with the 4th night dropping to 15 below and staying there until past noon the following day. The kind of cold that tests every decision a person made in September about how to spend the time before it arrived. Joel ran no heat source on the first 2 nights. He wanted to document the passive performance under actual extreme conditions, the same way he would have tested a repaired refrigerator before returning it to a customer. Interior temperature on the night of 15 below, 38 degrees at its lowest point, around 5 in the morning, when the exterior temperature had been at its worst for several hours. He was in a sleeping bag rated to 10 degrees above 0, which in a 38-degree environment was more than adequate. He slept through the night without waking. On the 3rd night, he ran a single candle lantern inside the structure for 2 hours before sleep, the same supplemental heat source that appears in every story from this channel, for the same reason it keeps appearing. 1 candle in a properly insulated small space raises the interior temperature by 6 to 8 degrees and holds it for 3 to 4 hours. He went to sleep at 61 degrees and woke to 44. Outside, minus 15. The gap that morning was 59 degrees. He wrote the number in the notebook. Then he sat with his coffee and thought about the refrigerator engineers and whatever design facility had produced those units. The people who specified that foam thickness and that R value to hold a 35-degree interior against a 70-degree kitchen. They had built something with a performance margin that vastly exceeded the environment they designed it for, and he had found that margin and used it in the other direction. Cecil came over that morning. He had his own thermometer and his own numbers, which told a different story about the previous night. He showed Joel. Joel showed Cecil. Neither of them said much. The numbers were doing the talking. Cecil asked if Joel would help him build something similar. Joel said yes. Over the following 2 weeks, Joel helped Cecil construct a modified version of the sleeping module using foam harvested from 2 more curbside refrigerators they found together. The second build went faster because Joel knew exactly where the construction decisions were and what order to make them in. He started with the door this time. A social worker named Patricia, who ran outreach visits to the camp 3 times a week through a nonprofit operating out of a Fargo church, came to see the structure in the 2nd week of January. She had been hearing about it from multiple camp residents for weeks. She spent 40 minutes examining the construction and asking Joel specific questions about sourcing, assembly sequence, and moisture management. She asked if he could write down the basic approach in plain language. He wrote 3 pages over 2 mornings at the public library, formatted the way he would have formatted a service procedure for a repair manual. Materials and sources, assembly sequence. The one thing you have to get right first. She made copies and distributed them through her network across 3 encampments in the Fargo area. Joel spent 4 winters in that structure, not 4 consecutive winters, in the same physical location. Encampments shift, properties change, circumstances require adjustment, but 4 winters in structures built on the same principle, each one refined from the previous version. By the 4th winter, the build had a double-layer floor, a ventilation port with a directional baffle to prevent cold infiltration, and a door seal that used 2 overlapping layers of gasket material harvested from the same refrigerator disassembly process that produced the foam. The interior temperature on the coldest night of the 4th winter held at 52 degrees, while the exterior sat at -22. He was not in the camp by then because he needed to be. He was in the camp because he was the person people came to when they needed to understand how to build something warm. And that role had become as much a part of his daily work as the appliance routes had been. In the spring of 2012, an appliance repair company in the Fargo metro was hiring. Joel applied. The hiring manager asked about the gap in his employment history. Joel explained what he had been doing for 4 years. The hiring manager was quiet for a moment, then said that anyone who understood refrigerator insulation well enough to live inside, it probably understood refrigerator insulation well enough to fix them. Joel was hired on the same day. He gave the 4th winter structure to a man named Earl, who had arrived at the camp in February with inadequate gear and a situation that required staying through the spring. He walked Earl through the maintenance points before he left: the door seal, the floor moisture barrier, the ventilation gap. Earl stayed in the structure through 2 more winters before his own situation resolved. He maintained it the same way Joel had shown him. Here is what I want to leave you with, because I've been thinking about it since I first heard this story. An appliance repair technician's job is diagnostic. You arrive at a broken machine, you find the failure point, you isolate it, you fix it, you test the repair before you leave the job site, you write it down, you move on to the next call. Joel applied that exact procedure to the problem of staying warm in a Fargo winter with no money and no shelter. He found the failure point, a nylon tent that could not hold temperature, and he identified the resources available to fix it. He isolated the solution from the noise of every suggestion that was convenient but wrong. He built the repair, tested it on the first cold night, found the one thing that was still failing, fixed that too, wrote it down, and moved. On to the next problem. The refrigerators on those curbs were not broken. Their compressors were broken. The foam in their walls had never failed. The engineers who designed them had done their jobs correctly, and the foam had done its job correctly for 15 or 20 years, and it was still doing its job correctly on the night Joel took it apart and moved it somewhere the engineers had never imagined it going. That is not resourcefulness in the inspirational poster sense of the word. It is professional knowledge applied to a problem that the profession had never been asked to solve. The knowledge does not care about the context. It only knows what it knows. And on a Fargo night at 15 below zero, what it knew was worth more than almost anything else available in that camp. If this story stayed with you, there is another one on this channel about someone else who looked at something the world had finished with and understood that the world had made a mistake about what it was. It is there whenever you are ready for it. The Street Survival Solutions Field Guide is linked in the description. The principles behind what Joel was working through laid out before you need them rather than after.
What's it like outside today?